Se distancie lo più possible. Quand on est gamin, on dit c'est.
Questions. Actually, I'm very familiar with Malcolm Knowles' Principles of Andragogy, and I actually try to incorporate as many of those principles into my teaching as possible. One, that adult learners want to be engaged and involved. They want to be able to connect a practical experience with the content that they learn in the class. They're more problem-centered when and that's why you will see a lot of group work in graduate school, because most of the time adults can relate to something problem-based if they're solving a problem, and you get to do a lot of that with group work. One of the things that I found difficult in the adult learning environment is when there are different generations who have so many different perspectives, and I think it's very important at that point to zero in on some of Malcolm Knowles' principles of andragogy, because you can then realize, well, maybe that's why they answer the question differently than why a millennial or a Gen Xer would have answered the question a little differently. So as a professor, we're supposed to come in and be able to facilitate that conversation, not necessarily to make everybody agree, but to get everybody to understand and focus in on the problem rather than their opinion or their perspective, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. Adult learners are more problem-based learners. That they base a lot of their feedback or intuition on experiences that they've had before, and that they're pretty much engaged. They're here on a mission.
I think that adult learning is incredibly important for society and is one way that society can resolve many of its problems, because a well-educated society is a peaceful society. A well-educated society is one that can adapt to changes, whether they be environmental, cultural, or economic. So adult learning is important when people are looking for a new job or changing from one job to another job. It's also very important for people that want to learn new skills for their home life, for their cultural life, for their family life. And so adult learning can be used in many, many ways. Okay, so learning as a child is relatively easy as long as the child doesn't have any learning disabilities, problems with dyslexia, or problems with reading, or problems with drawing, or problems with writing. I can tell you that learning as a child is easy because you retain a lot of information when you're a child. And your mind is growing, and as you grow you can build complex ideas from simple ones. But I think that in adult education, adults tend to go directly to the heart of a problem, and so they learn more easily about specific goals. So if they have a specific goal in mind, an adult can learn better than a child.
I think it's very difficult to compare the two, because you learn as a child more so from a constructivist view. You know, the teacher is sitting in front of the classroom, and a behaviorist view. The teacher is standing in front of the classroom, the students are sitting in their rows, you are giving them the information, and then they regurgitate the information back to you. And I think that educators are seeing, probably within the last 5 to 6 years, that that's not the best way for children to learn. And so there's more group work for kids. When we've been touring some of the schools, we see them in small groups. So there are 4 groups, and they are given a problem, and they get to solve the problem together. The teacher teaches the content, she explains the content, and then she puts them into small groups, and they problem solve together. Okay. As an adult, adults as I was stating before, as it relates to andragogy and Malcolm Knowles, adults, for the most part, the adult learner has that desire. They're doing this because this is something that they want to do. They've made a choice to either go to college or to go to graduate school, and they have a desire, they have a goal set in mind. Whereas with children, this is something that they're programmed to do. Your mother says, get up, you go to school, this is what you have to do, you got to make good grades, blah, 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 blah. So children are taught to appreciate school and learn in school, whereas with adults, they have, they're self-motivated. This is something that they choose to do. They have to pay for their education. Also in the college classroom, though, the undergraduate college classroom and some graduate classrooms, you have professors that are still considered old school, that they get in front of the class and they lecture. That's not my format, because I understand how adults learn. I will present scenarios. I use YouTube videos. I use articles, more practical things for my students, because I know they can relate to that better than putting them in front of a textbook and say, read this, and then I need you to regurgitate to me what you've gotten from that. That is not the best way for the content to stick. And what my goal is for my students to learn the information, gain the knowledge, and then be able to transfer that knowledge practically either into their workforce or whatever that next job that they're trying to get. I don't care how much they remember. I want them to be able to practice what they've learned.
When you're learning a language, it's better to be young because you retain more of that language and you can hear the differences in the sounds much better than when you're an older person. That doesn't mean that older people can't learn a new language, just they learn it differently. They have to learn it without memorizing. They have to learn it with maybe the same fun that you teach a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old. But in terms of actually learning grammar and learning how to write, it's difficult for adult people.
Okay, so how do I personally learn best? There's not one particular way that I learn best. I like to read, but I also like to talk. I like to speak what I've learned, because I think repetition is one of the, I think the more you repeat something, the more that you remember it. I had to do the research. I had to write it out. Then I had to formulate my thoughts. I had to put it in an outline in my mind. And then, so there were various approaches to help me really grasp the information. I look at YouTube videos a lot to see what's going on. So there's no one particular way I think that anybody learns. I think it has to be a combination of methods to make someone grasp the knowledge and really keep it. But that's an individual approach. So as an educator, I try all of them in the classroom. I do all different types of things because I know all learners learn differently. But I think it would be unfair to say, what is the primary way that a person learns? Because you don't know what that person's skill sets are. You don't know what their weaknesses are. And if you're trying to teach to their weaknesses, they won't succeed in the classroom. So you got to figure that out.
I think personally I learn best by doing. So learning by doing is an experience-based learning. Now somebody can teach me from a book, but it may get a little bit boring. Somebody may try to lecture, and it might be interesting, especially for 5 minutes. But then I think learning by doing is probably the best expert. And I think humor is another way to learn. You can usually remember an attitude more than you can remember a pair of words. And that attitude has to be conveyed with those words to be effective.
Es distancia lo que pese.